It is an honor and a privilege to introduce not just their congressman, someone I call a friend. Before I get to that, there's a couple of rules that we have around. We have around 30 or 40 rules. I'm joking, but I want to go over these. It's kind of help let it move along at a good pace and make sure everyone gets an opportunity to speak. If you'd like to ask a question, please move towards the aisle after the congressman's opening remarks. Out of respect for everyone, please be patient. We know many of you are going to have questions, and the congressman's going to try to make sure everyone gets their question answered. Because of time, I would ask that you limit yourself to one question, and please try to keep it to less than a minute. If you don't get to ask the question, there are members of the staff available to take your question or concern or forms where you enter. Also, in order to protect your privacy, and this is pretty important, if you have a specific casework issue that has to deal with Social Security, disability, or veterans benefits, or anything of that nature, please see one of the congressman's staff members so that they can get your information. Of course, let's have a respectful interchange tonight, and it's a great opportunity to have the congressman in Gaston County and to be able to hold a town hall. You can go to his website and look up his bio. He holds a lot of high offices in Washington. He's done a lot of great work. But I wanted to share just a couple things with you that I think are very important when it comes to representing individuals and why I support Congressman McHenry. Two things. Several months ago, a local church gave me a call, and they said, listen, we want to do something about the crisis at the border. We don't want to get political. We just want to kind of help some of the children there and things of that nature. I text the congressman. Within just a little while, I get a text back. Hey, can we get you some information? We're going to get some information to these churches and see what we can do to help them be able to go down and help folks on the border. That doesn't make headlines. And granted, probably most of you here don't even have a question of that nature tonight. But that's the kind of constituent service that a lot of people overlook. I'll give you another case. There was a young couple who were adopting two children from the Congo and having a very hard time because the government there decided that there were going to be no more adoptions. Well, this couple had already went through the adoption process. They already had all the documentation. They were just calling the system. They called everybody that you can imagine. I called Patrick, said, we've got a young couple, they need some help. Not only did he personally step in and help, he had his staff step in and help. He co-sponsored the bill to kind of help move things like this along in the Congress. And again, it's things like that. They're not sexy. They don't get a lot of attention. But when I look at who's representing me and who we're sending to Congress, it's not just the big issues. It's these small things that matter as well. And I'm proud to call the congressman my friend. I think he does an excellent job at constituent service. And if I have an issue, I can call his office, I can text him, and get it answered. So without further ado, Congressman Patrick McHenry.
Well, Tracy, you let out my first secret. I got to stay hydrated. The second secret is this is very low, right? But Dr. Skinner and Chairman Philbeck helped considerably with that. And I want to thank Dr. Skinner for hosting us here on the Gaston College's Belmont campus, and thank you for the work you do for our community and our region. It's much appreciated, much needed, especially in these tough economic times. I know you do a lot with a little and stretch the dollar and make it very efficient, so we certainly appreciate that. Chairman Philbeck, thank you for your service on the Gaston County Commission, and thank you for your friendship. You've been a great public servant. I'm honored to call you a friend as well. And thank you all for coming out. Each August we hold town hall meetings, and it's a bit daunting because you never know what people are going to raise in town hall meetings. The mayor knows this. In Belmont, each city council meeting may be different. In the state house, Dana, it's different as well. But this feedback is very important, and I certainly appreciate y'all taking time out of y'all's busy schedule to come and make your voice heard. And so we'll get to your questions, but I at least want to give you a little sense of what I'm thinking right now and the prism by which I try to view all the issues that move through the U.S. House and try to focus my energies on those issues that affect our people. Good to see you as well. So we have 2 state reps, a mayor, we're doing very well, and another county commissioner. Joe, good to see you. So John Corbett, Joe Carpenter as well, so thank y'all for being here. And now I'm going to keep looking around and see who I miss. I'll stop there for now. But there are a few things that are on my mind that I want to share with you. And we have so many very important and very pressing needs in our country. But we have the political rhetoric out of Washington, and the political rhetoric you hear on TV is about 2 different groups. Those that aren't working, those at the lowest end of the economic scale, and the 1%. And it seems like the rhetoric is only focused on those 2 different groups. But what's missing on this is the thought process of trying to think through what is happening and what is affecting the average family in this country. That family right in the middle. Half the people make more than them, half the people make less than them. Right? The median family in this country is making about what they made 10 years ago and about what they made in 1989. Shocking. It's shocking. And so what has happened to that family? Well, they've been left behind the prosperity of the 90s, the prosperity of the early 2000s, and they're still suffering under these tough economic times that we have. So what is that family going through, and how can we help that family? It's not about making them feel good. It's about making their lives better. So what are they facing? Well, they're certainly facing higher grocery bills. I don't have to tell you that. You just show up and the price of milk's greater than it was 5 years ago, certainly more than it was 20 years ago. The price of bread, the price of all the foodstuffs have gone up. Well, that's a very simple thing, right? Well, it hits them harder than most of us in this room. Well, what else? Well, in our community, most of us move by our own automobile or truck. We don't have plentiful alternative transportation sources. That's just not how we live in the Southeast. Outside of a few areas in Charlotte where they have light rail and bus service, we don't have that. So the average family, the price of the pumps hurts them more than anybody else. Well, we can change that by having a national energy policy, by using our resources, funding alternative energy research as well, and making sure we deliver and make sure we use our natural resources. The rest of the globe does it. We should do it as well. We can resolve the question of the price of the pumps. The question of when you flip on the switch, the light switch. Energy prices have gone up for electricity prices have gone up. And a lot of that's because of regulation. Now, we certainly want a clean environment, but there's a tipping point by which families can't afford it. Can't afford the new technology, new demands that government agencies put on us as ratepayers. So we can resolve that as well when we're talking about energy prices. So we're talking about groceries, we talk about gas in the pumps, we talk about flipping the lights on and paying for electricity. These are not fascinating and interesting things to scream about on TV, but they're important for the average family. That's before we talk about the cost of health care, which is certainly, the government has imposed greater costs on us, and rates are going up as a result of this. That can be resolved. But the most important thing to that average family is making sure they educate their children and leave their children in a better position to have a good paying job. That once they get out of school, that they actually have a job that they can access. So education, and certainly we need education reform. Certainly we need choice in education as well. When you put parents and teachers in charge, rather than folks sitting in Washington behind desks, we're better off. So all these issues we can talk through and resolve through better government policies that don't drive up the cost and limit choice. Those are the types of things that I am concerned about when we deal with all these important issues that come through. And that's before we talk about tax bills. That's before we talk about so many other price points that we all have to deal with. But that average family, if you can resolve the price of the pumps, the price of the grocery store, the price of health care, and better educational outcomes, you can make a whole difference in the world for another generation. That's what I'm focused on. Sorry, I get a little revved up. So I'd like to answer your questions now, but I at least wanted to tell you how I try to view things that are coming through the House of Representatives and try to affect those important things. Certainly you'll have questions about health care and about border security, and I'd love to answer all those, but I'll leave it to you to ask the questions as you see fit. So Tracy went over some of the rules, and so what we're going to do is line up right by Jeff, who works with him. He has a microphone. We'll be able to line up here and ask questions. Are you doing it over there, David, or not?
No.
You're just sitting there,
yeah, I was on the wall.
making sure the wall stays in. Okay. So if you want to line up by Jeff, and if you could, if you would, as people are getting up, you can come down here one across. But if you would, if you just keep your question to one or your comment to one in about a minute, that way we can take care of people's questions tonight as they go on. And we have time. So the one thing I would ask, and I always ask with groups of adults, is that not everyone likes the language at the truck stop. So you can keep it as maybe a church conversation, even if there are hard feelings about it. You don't have to be nice to me, I work for you, but if you would, be polite to those that are here in attendance as well. So, we'll start with you.
Okay. Patrick, thank you for being our representative. I appreciate the job you do.
Say your name, where you're from.
My name is Dana Baumgartner, and I'm from Gastonia.
And you are a state representative?
I am Representative Baumgartner, District 109. I represent Belmont, Cramerton, and part of Gastonia. Happy to be here. Happy to be representing y'all, some of you. But anyway, thank you for what you're doing. I'm glad to have you up there. You're not the problem. We have problems in Congress. You know it. We all know it. Are we ever going to be able to get our borders secure? And congratulations, by the way, on getting into leadership.
Thank you. Thank you. About border security, look, we have right now, for the last couple of years in Washington, there's been this mantra of comprehensive immigration potential component in it, that there's something for everyone to like, but also large chunks that everyone should hate, or does, if you've read it. And so the Senate passed this big bill that is, I believe, about 2,000 pages, and it's very problematic. Well, all the while, we've had the president say things about young people that are here illegally. And so folks in Central America have heard that. And as a result, there's a large group of folks that are coming to our border believing that if they simply get into the country, they'll become citizens. And that's a problem. And it's a problem for a couple different reasons. First of all, as a nation, we should and must secure our border, first and foremost. Every nation on the planet does it, and those that don't no longer are nations. Right? So you have to secure your border. Well, we also have to recognize this is a humanitarian crisis. When you have children making a perilous journey, it is gut-wrenching to think of what they go through, much less the mindset of a parent that would give their children to a coyote to bring them across to our country. I mean, the dangers and the deaths and just absolute horrors that they experience just to get to the border. So out of that, we have to recognize that yes, we still are a great nation. People want to participate in our society, but we have to have laws for them to come here legally and be a part of our society, and they have to obey those laws in order to come to our country and participate in our freedoms. So what we passed out of the House of Representatives on Friday was a bill that did 4 things and only 4 things. Very straightforward. We say, first of all, you have to change that 2008 law that dealt with human trafficking. The 2008 law says if you're a Mexican or a Canadian child and you appear at the border, we treat you humanely, but we return you home to your parents. It's a simple and straightforward process. Well, what we did was change the law so that this was our proposal out of the House that we passed, that those in Central America are treated like Mexican and Canadian children when they appear at our border. They are returned home. The second part of it is we provide for judges so that they can make determinations on what to do with these children. You also have to fund detention. You have to fund beds so that we can house them and then fund the travel home. So we fund that. So judges, changes to the 2008 law. We also allowed states to call up the National Guard, and we fund it as a federal priority. I think securing our border shouldn't be a state responsibility. It is a federal responsibility, so we have to fund it. So if Rick Perry calls up the National Guard, it shouldn't be the taxpayers of Texas who have to pay for that. We as American citizens should honor that and defend the border. The fourth and final thing will sound the most absurd of them all. We have federal lands that touch the border, our southern border. National monument lands the president designates. Well, under the president's designation, the Border Patrol is not allowed to go on those lands to patrol. So we changed that law. You can see this, it's 42 pages of legislative text. A few dozen of them, actually about less than 20 pages of it deal with the changes to law. The other part funds it. You can read it, you can judge it for yourself. But we passed that law to deal with the crisis as it currently exists. We also said clearly, and I'm sorry to go on for those that are staying in line, but we say clearly, this is a crisis. There are a lot of other things I want to do when it comes to immigration, mainly on the enforcement side. But we shouldn't use this crisis to try to pass something the American people won't believe in or support. So that's what we've done at the border. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
What's your name? Where are you from?
Thank you, Representative McHenry. My name is Tim Stalka, and I'm from Hicks Road, Grover, North Carolina. And I just want to thank you for your commitment to conservative values and to principles of ethics. The day you quit being concerned about ethics and start being more concerned about giving a free handout to everybody, the day I'm going to quit voting for you. But my question for you is, have you or will you urge the White House to take military action against Hamas, who is incurring war crimes and terrorist activity against Israel, which is our ally? Or do you not perceive Israel as our ally?
No, Israel is our ally and our friend, and I think we're blessed as a nation by our connection with Israel. I believe that fervently, and that's how I vote. In terms of the best action for us to take against Hamas, we shouldn't fund them. We should not let them participate in the financial system, because we are still the central hub for the global financial system. We should not allow them to access the financial system. We should also put pressure on the rest of the countries around the globe to not fund them. And then finally, we have to do what we've been continuing to do, which is have that first line we have a relationship in terms of military technology with Israel that is unlike any other country on the globe. That exchange of technology has helped us fund and help support Iron Dome, which has saved potentially thousands of lives over the last few months. And that is fantastic technology. A large chunk of that technology comes out of the United States. Pretty amazing stuff. But we have to continue that first that primary relationship we have at the military level to make sure that Israel has the funds they need to defend themselves, but also the technology that they need in order to fight this war. That technological exchange has actually benefited us as well in a number of different battles around the globe in recent years. So those are, I think, the primary things we should be about. This is for Israel to take on the security for their people. If you think about what Israel and the Israelis have suffered under with a rocket attack on a practically daily basis, there's a reason why they've taken action. And until we actually have good information, I'm not going to judge the action that they have. What I see out of this conflict is Israelis, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, said clearly, he said, look, Israelis use weapons to defend people. Hamas uses people to defend weapons. If you've seen these pictures, they have a missile installation or under a hospital. Right? I mean, the positioning of this stuff is done for media effect, for sympathy, rather than to actually protect their people. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen fitting with the extremists that they are. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Fred Clemmer. I'm from Gastonia. My concern is immigration and the lawless activity of our president, and what realistically can be done to keep his overreaching contained.
Well, this is a challenge. This is a challenge because, we have checks and balances, and we have 3 co-equal branches of government, which those checks and balances the founding fathers put in place to make sure that each one adheres to the Constitution and to the laws. The challenge I have, as your representative in Congress, is that the legislative branch is divided. Democrat Senate, Republican House. And so we can't be a check on the president's, we can't check the president's power like we should be able to, based off of inaction in the Senate. So what Speaker of the House John Boehner authorized and came up with this idea after consulting a number of constitutional scholars is for the House, on behalf of the American people, to sue the president for not adhering to the law. Well, in this case, Obamacare. It means that the legislative branch can go to the judicial branch in order to check the executive branch. Well, it's not perfect and it takes time. Well, we have an election that's 3 months away. The beauty of our system is, and the challenge for everyone, obviously, is that we have the most frequent elections on the planet, regularly held. And so I think the next election, if the American people speak clearly, then the legislative branch could be unified to check the president's power. Then you can actually put appropriations bills, budget bills on the president's desk that he can either veto or accept. And right now, how we negotiate as House Republicans, there are 3 people in the negotiation: the president, Harry Reid, and John Boehner. And try as you might, 1 against 2, no matter how the size, as long as you're about the same size, you always pick the 2 over the 1. If there are 2 negotiating with the 1, we have Mitch McConnell or some other Republican majority leader, then they can actually, I think, get better outcomes for us. But in the meantime, the authorization of the suit can help over the long term to ensure that no branch of government goes beyond what the founders intended and constrained us to. I share your frustration. Come and spend a week with me, you'll be more frustrated. Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
Swinderman from Belmont, candidate for school board. I have 2 children in Gaston County Public Schools. Our kids, there's an immediate problem with school starting in 3 weeks with the loophole. With the immigrants coming in, we have the CDC requires legal immigrants pass a physical exam and be screened. But my concern is that people will come in and not get those exams. As my children who are internationally adopted, they had the exams, they passed all the tests, and then friends that I know that came in and passed all the tests. But there's a loophole, and the schools can't do anything about it because unless they already have in place physicals, which they only have for kindergarten. So unless they already have that in place, it's going to take something from Congress, is my understanding, is what I've been told. Even the state legislature can't do anything until 2015. If they pass the screens like TB, tuberculosis, and communicable diseases, that people would be they would be excluded for if they don't pass those.
Yes. Well, and my understanding is that schools, if you're a transfer student, you still have to have the paperwork that you've been screened. You've had those shots. That was my understanding.
Because everything else, and if you come in illegally, you don't get the CDC as required, but the schools are, their hands are tied.
Well, this is the problem with taking children that should be returned to their parents and bringing them into states across the country to be careful. I mean, this is why I passed I supported and helped craft the bill that we passed last Friday that would return the children back home. So dealing with this, though, I think it's important that states are notified and localities are notified when you have an influx of people like the president is placing and the executive branch is placing around the country. There should be notifications, so at the very least the the community health departments and the schools will be able to deal with it.
They can't even ask if their citizenship status, or not even know how to ask. So it's just like there's a loophole. If the federal government is not making people pass these tests for their circumventing, there's nothing they can do, is my understanding. Something else has to be in the legislature, being told by John.
So let me get your information, and I'll see if I can get you better information. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Tate McQueen. I'm coming from Asheville, North Carolina. I'm a career public educator and a coach. And I'm coming in a spirit of nonpartisanship. As you know, I'm a victim of a corporate contaminator that poisoned the water in my community, where we've had 50 people diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma and scores of other cancers. I have contamination in my well. I have a 6.5-year-old son and an 8-year-old daughter. Recently, I received a letter from your office, and it was from July 21st, 2014. And the concern is that there was misinformation in this letter that actually blamed the victims living next door to this plant for holding up progress. It provided a timeline that was not accurate. Another concern that we've had is that the contaminator has been funding another group in our community to interact with the Congressman's office and other officials like our senators and our other Congressman Mark Meadows. And it's a very, very concerning situation because if the contaminator is providing money to a group that is not impacted by the site, and yet there are real victims, like the Rices. Larry Rice is a Vietnam veteran. He served his country for 42 years. He's a double Purple Heart recipient. He is going to probably die from an inoperable brain tumor that comes from associations with TCE, trichloroethylene exposure. And many of you may be aware of what was happening at Camp Lejeune with the poisoning down there. It's the same contamination. I am concerned, as I have extended several overtures over the years, because I've been going to Washington for the last almost 7 years begging for help for our community, as a victim, working on behalf of other victims. And I would like to know why we are having our federal representative meeting with people that are out of our district, because the people that you've been meeting with do not live in the 10th district, they live in the 11th. The contamination originates in the 11th, and it runs into my neighborhood, the 10th. And there are people like the Robinsons, the Harolds, the Penlands, the Bradleys, the Murphys. So many people have been impacted. And what we've had is absentee leadership. We've been begging for help on the most basic need. most of you, and I really respect the fact that you're asking questions about Hamas and the terrorism. Can you imagine the terror that we live in every day? Because recently there were 13 people that were removed from their homes because the air is too unsafe to breathe. Now, I provided these documents in all. Unfortunately, it totals 62,922 pages, which I realize is a lot, but I read it because I'm impacted. We have letters going back to 1990 where the EPA officials were warned that the next door neighbors were getting sick. And now we have letters being put out that blame the very victims for being responsible for that contamination. Can we count on you to come into our community? You and I work together because in addition to being an educator for my entire career, I'm also a candidate for the 10th district. And I'm willing to put aside our differences on ideology and work together to help you be a better representative for my community, because right now we are being impacted. We are being hurt. We're having funerals. We're having people suffer. And if we can't get taking care of people at home right, how can we ask questions about taking care of people abroad? You know, if word got out south of the border that it was unsafe to drink the water here or breathe the air here, that might act as a good impetus to keep them from coming here. But that's our reality, and it's a daily reality. And I would like to, open the lines of discourse. I have emailed your staff. I have offered to help you. And as you know, I think that there's probably two of us that know this material as well as I do. And when you do have your family impacted with contamination that caused us to go all the way to the Supreme Court, and we lost 7-2. And it's very important for you to understand that Patrick and I agree on one thing. The president is not perfect. In fact, he set the Department of Justice against us because he didn't want to see the U.S. Marine Corps have their day in court for the poisoning that they suffered. It's immoral. And we have a responsibility to remove that, remove back
if I may answer your question.
Thank you, sir.
As you stated, this case has gone on for 20 years. The case has gone on for 20 years. With the redrawing of the congressional lines, and well, you're in Gaston County. You know that Sue Myrick was our congresswoman for before redrawing lines. I grew up in Gastonia, y'all. And so when they redrew the lines, the district then went into Buncombe County. And Congressman Meadows and I inherited an awful, horrific case where a company, through whatever means that they did, but they contaminated the soil and into the drinking water in the community. There have been lawsuits, there's a settlement. This has gone on well before I was in Congress, much less representing Buncombe County. And since I've taken over, as you know, we've worked diligently to try to get action as quickly as possible. And that's my number one desire, is to make sure that we take care of the people that are affected and to fix the problem. Now, we're waiting on a response that should come back August 11th from the EPA. And the EPA has not been a fast agency on dealing with this, but we pushed and pushed and pushed to make sure that they do and take the actions they can take immediately. In terms of the timeline, sir, what you mentioned in there is that there was a delay because in order to go on property, the government has to have permission of the property owner. That did slow things down. Now, I don't question the speed by which they allowed it, because the agency has not been particularly responsive. And so I don't fault anyone. I was just relaying back what a government agency provided, and that's what we try to do to you and other members in the community that are affected. And Congressman Meadows and I continue to work through that. I'll continue to work with you and other community members and try my best to get the results so we can clean this project up, so the drinking water is returned to what it should be, which is clean and drinkable for everyone, and that the wrongdoers are held to account.
Well, the one point of clarification is the reason that the family members held up the testing is that EPA wanted to test a crawl space, and I'm pretty sure no one in this room lives in their crawl space. They held it up because they said, no, we want where we breathe tested. And as soon as they tested it, they came and relocated them because testing their airspace showed that it was unsafe to breathe the air. But this letter, which
your staff knows, and I have presented to you, and this is the first time you and I have even had a conversation about it. This letter shows that they are saying it's the fault of the homeowners who have been relocated. We have environmental refugees in Asheville, North Carolina. And so this delay
Sir,
stuff is
we have
not
other
acceptable.
folks in line,
Appreciate
and I
it.
certainly appreciate you coming and making this, traveling this distance to make your voice heard. We did have a town hall yesterday in 2 counties closer to you, just so others know, but I appreciate your
Monday,
comment.
thank you.
Okay, all right. So, thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm Richard Gibson, I'm from Kings Mountain, I came down, thank you for having this town hall.
Thank you.
My main question, you said you were more concerned about the median income people, that's the average middle income. I'm more concerned about the working poor. My question is about the earned income credit. The way I see it, the earned income credit is really a tax credit for the working poor to bring them up to a living way to live. And they work hard to get it. My problem is, if you raise the minimum wage, they don't earn more money, we would have to get that earned income credit. That earned income credit comes from my dollars, tax dollars, our dollars. It's not government money, it's taxpayers' money. So I'm saying, to get people off the earned income credit, we could raise the minimum wage, they could earn more money and not qualify. What do you have to say about that?
Well, raising that, according to the Congressional Budget Office, will actually lose us about 500,000 jobs.
I understand it.
And so-
600,000, well, 1,200,000, I mean, 1.2 million in the last six months throughout the country. Cleveland County seems to still be a kind of working poor people. I don't know about Gaston County and the rest of us, but like I say,
But
we don't seem
simply
like we're,
raising-
we don't seem, you said, we're the medium class people, where do they, how do they lose their money? How can we help them? Well, again, I'm not saying it all went to the rich, but I'm saying a lot of it went to corporations, a lot of it went to a lot of rich people that make a whole lot more money than we do.
Okay, let me try to answer your question. Simply raising that base wage does not get the results that people want it to, because it ends up
increases
costing.
consumer spending and it reduces the tax burden on the government because it eliminates that earned income.
Okay, I hear you. So let me respond,
Okay.
if I may. According to the Congressional Budget Office, they estimate it will cost 500,000 jobs. So if you actually want to get people into employment, having less employment is not the way to go. The other thing to consider is the largest group that earns minimum wage are students, right? And so, no, that's according to the Census Bureau and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So I'm just telling you the reality, and you know, we can disagree on the issue, and that's fine, and it's okay that we disagree. But I want to give you an answer to your question as I see it, and we can disagree, and that's okay. But having more employment and a growing economy will help more people than simply the government setting a wage. If we actually focus on career and technical education, which is done in this building, and the Dallas campus, and the Lincolnton campus, then you can have folks with technical education that don't have to talk about a minimum, they can start talking about a maximum. And that's what I'm focused on. And it doesn't get the results that a lot of people, for political reasons, want to push it. And what I'm trying to do is get more people into good-paying jobs. Last month, they touted that America created what's under the headlines. Well, under the headlines, we created just over 700,000 part-time jobs, and we lost about 500,000 full-time jobs. So we're replacing full-time work for part-time work. That's not right for families. That's not good for families. And that's a result of a number of different things. But it doesn't make the economy better and doesn't help families in our community. And so I'm trying to focus on growing the economy and doing those types of things.
Corporations like Walmart and McDonald's and those people, they're the ones that create those part-time jobs. They don't want to put people on full-time employment, so they have to pay their health care. But other than that, I appreciate your
And
time.
why is that? Because Obamacare defines full-time work as what?
30 hours.
30 hours a week. So therefore, you're saying if you create those jobs, you have a much higher cost basis of employment,
Exactly.
and so you're creating more part-time work. Well, you want to actually have the impact of helping those folks get more wages. You change that Obamacare requirement from 30 hours a week to 40 hours a week, and it will get you the same result in take-home pay. I've tried, and that's what I've supported, and that's one of the changes.
We know we need to change the healthcare law.
Yes, we have other folks in line, rather than debate, but let's try to move on here. Thanks. Try to answer as many questions as possible, be respectful. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Congressman, my name is Dave Henderson. I live in Gaston County. And my question really is about the phasing out of tax deductions. The concern I have, back in '86, I'm old enough to remember the great Ronald Reagan, he phased out.
Well, I have gray hair and a baby face, but
Anyway,
I remember
He
'86.
phased out, Republicans
Not well.
phase out deductions on credit cards with the idea of having a reduced taxation. Well, they phased out that deduction. However, they never reduced taxes. And that hurt a lot of average families. Now, this past year, they phased out medical premiums, state and local sales tax. And my daughter, apparently they phased out the interest paid on college loans. So, what, not necessarily you, but what is your party doing to get those phase outs back into law where the average person will not be so impacted when they file their taxes next year?
Well, this is PEP and PEAS. These are two provisions that were re-emerged into the tax code a year and a half ago. And it raised taxes on a group of Americans, and I opposed that piece of legislation. What I think we need, when we look at corporate taxation and personal income tax rates in the tax code for individuals and corporations, we do need fundamental tax reform. But you bring up a good point. Tax reform, like in '86, is great in name. We also, who supports tax reform? Oh, come on, wake up, come on. So, we all support tax reform, right? It's a great idea. It's a great idea, probably like how attractive I am, right? At a great distance, I'm probably much more attractive than when you get close to it. Right? Okay, only my wife would laugh at that joke, sorry. But tax reform at a great distance is great, it's fantastic. And the closer you get to it, you start talking about individual winners and losers in the tax code. It's difficult. But I think generally what we have to do is, if we're going to phase out exemptions, you have to lower the rate as a result. And so we shouldn't have tax reform as a revenue grab to get more out of the American people. We should actually do it on with a zero baseline, right?
What is your party doing to make sure that it's not a smoke and mirrors game again?
Well, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee put forward a tax reform plan this year. It's the first time any party's put out a tax reform proposal outside of a presidential candidate that does a two-pager on tax reform. It is a serious plan. There's some challenges with it, and I've talked to him. I've shared and communicated with the changes I would like to see, but we put out a substantive tax reform plan. Next Congress, if the Republicans are still in charge of the U.S. House of Representatives, a guy named Paul Ryan will be the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee that writes tax law. And his intent is, as well as mine, to actually lower the rates and eliminate loopholes so that the American people will pay about what they pay now and after tax reform. And as a result, as cheaper compliance costs, you'll have greater economic growth as a component of it. And as a result, the economy will grow stronger, we'll have more jobs with a simpler, flatter, fairer tax code. That's what I believe we should do. There's a lot of debate about a fair tax versus a flat tax. I think a flat tax is much more politically achievable. And so getting to something that looks closer to that than what our current tax code is would be a huge benefit.
I'm for tax reform, but about 2 or 3 years ago, as a retiree, I paid more federal tax than GE Corporation. Something is wrong and it's got to be fixed.
Right. So why? Why? Was it because, is it because that corporation? No, is it
We
because that?
elected you to go out with a burning desire to make something happen.
So I'm trying to answer your question. Yes. So is it because that corporation is a rogue group? No. They're utilizing all these loopholes in the tax code that I think we need to eliminate. And if we had a simple tax code, then these companies would take money that's offshore, return it.
Everybody's looking out for the little guy. And that's what upsets me. And I love you like a son, but I gotta let you know, it upsets me. I quit giving contributions to the Republican Party because you guys haven't done enough in that area. But I'll be quiet.
Well, you got a choice, and I understand. But in the Washington that we're working in, we put forward a serious tax reform plan. You haven't heard that from Harry Reid or Max Baucus or any of that stuff. So we're trying, and all I can do is push forward and control what I can control. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Betsy Keith. I'm from Gastonia, North Carolina. I tried to make this into one question. I'll do my best. We appreciate your tenure in Congress as you are known as a budget hawk.
Will you hold up the microphone for
You're
her?
known as a budget hawk. My question is, would you support transparency in the expenses for the upcoming lawsuit against the president? Why? And how would that lawsuit be funded?
Well, our tax dollars would fund that out of the legislative branch appropriations bill. I do support transparency in that, as well as the Justice Department and you know, the funds, all funds the government spends out of outside of covert operations that would put American lives at risk. I've supported that. I think the best approach for us is to actually take all government expenditures outside of very sensitive areas of national security. Outside of that, I think everyone should be able to go online and look at all the expenditures of government and judge for yourself. That way, instead of having special inspector generals like we have for government programs currently that are supposed to root out wastes and fraudulent activities, all of us could be those inspector generals. I think it'd be a good thing in Raleigh, and it'd be a good thing in Washington, and it'd be fantastic not just for this one lawsuit that you mentioned, but also for all of government. So, thank you for raising the question.
Why was it voted down in committee?
I
Why was the transparency voted down in committee?
I have no idea.
Bob Barker from Lucia.
Hi.
Very sorry, how many of you guys know who Sergeant Andrew Tamarisi is? Would you raise your hands? After I give my little comment, would you mind commenting on that? Going to take you down a little trip down memory lane. I have the April 13th, 1969 Charlotte Observer paper here. Headline: Nixon's budget has a $5.8 billion surplus, biggest in 18 years. What a difference 45 years is making. We've got a president who thinks God sits on his right hand. We've got a Democrat Party who thinks that they can be in every part, stay out of the bedroom, but they can be involved in every part of our lives. We have a Republican Party that I've been a member of for 34 years that has no clue what they stand for. We either have tyranny in this country or we have freedom. We've got over 72,000 pages of tax laws. We've got an Obama force and fraud bill called Obamacare. But 2,500 pages, they're writing rules and regulations every day. That doesn't sound like freedom to me. I'd like you to comment on that, please.
Well, it's hard to comment on it because I think everybody understands your point. The frustration the American people have is that we have a system of government that is instituted not for efficiency, to be highly inefficient. And the idea is you send me up to Washington and we fight it out and you all live free, right? So the system of government, checks and balances, is to protect freedom, not for efficiency, right? Efficiency, you'd put my wife in power and she'd make all the decisions and everything would be fine, right? Or you have a benevolent dictator who would say these are the rules, and if they're fair and good, everybody lives fine. If they're not, we have an awful repressive regime. So the checks and balances are there to protect freedom. Well, in the system, what we're faced with for the last couple of years is that those frequent elections, those checks and balances, mean that Washington, as well as Raleigh and our governments, usually don't go beyond what the bounds the American people want. So if the American people are opposed to it, usually Washington won't go in that direction. Then you had the bailout. Then you had that $1 trillion stimulus plan that didn't create jobs. Then you had Dodd-Frank, which is the Obamacare for financial regulation. Then you had Obamacare. And the American people said, whoa, a pox on all your houses. We don't like what we're seeing. You're going well beyond what the American people want. We reject this. And let's get back to constitutional moorings, constitutional principles, and limited forms of government. Right? Well, that's great. 2010 happens, and what happened? Well, you threw out a bunch of Democrats, you put in Republicans in the House of Representatives, but not in the Senate. Right? And then there's this discussion, well, just wait it out. Fight it out for 2 years. You Republicans, fight it out for 2 years, and in 2020, and actually put in place folks that we're talking about with limited government. In the meantime, we have to do everything in our power to be that check and balance. That's why there's the nice woman had a question about the lawsuit. We had other questions about this. We're trying everything in our power to fight tooth and nail. You don't see all the fighting going on and all the work that we're doing because it's not always on C-SPAN. It's not always on the news channels. And the media is not really a friend of my party in Washington, that's for sure. But what you want to see, I hear you, is more elbows and a lot less getting along. Is that about right?
You got to go to the judge.
Right.
These things are trying to be nice, it's not going to get us anywhere.
Right.
Republicans have to stand for something, and they have to put it to the American people. All these,
We can talk more afterwards.
I just want to say, all these government entitlement programs, you got to explain to the people that are getting them, look, if this country goes all to you know where, you're not going to have anything. And nobody in the government is going to care one iota about it. They think it's going to be there forever. You cannot last. You cannot last.
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon and good evening, Representative. My name is Ultra Price Bryant. I'm from Gastonia. I've heard you answer a lot of different questions, some of them that I had as well. And one of the recurring theme that I heard you say was working. We're working on this, we're working on this, we're working on this. My son pointed out to me, my 12-year-old pointed out to me that the House of Representatives is going to be in session in 2014, less than 180 days, which is a regular school year. And that the $174,000 salary that you all get for being in session in 2014 for 113 days seems absorbent. So my question to you is, since you will only have 27 more days to be in Washington the rest of the year, between now and the election, and if you went after, will you come back to the district more and have more meetings like this so that a more diverse constituent, for those that didn't vote for you, can have an opportunity to speak with you as well?
Well, yes, I'm active in the district. Whenever we're not voting in Washington, I do my best to be at home every one of those days I can, to talk to constituents, to travel 7 counties, to visit schools and businesses and have town halls. My tradition has been to do August town hall meetings, It's the time where I know we're gonna be out of session, and that's when I'm done. And the rest of the year, I'll have business meetings and go and speak to a group of employees on a break time or during their lunch, and I go around. So I don't plan to have more town hall meetings the remainder of this year because you're entering into the political season, and under the House rules, you cannot advertise out of your congressional office within 90 days of an election. So therefore, I don't hold town hall meetings or announce town hall meetings in that time frame because it's not fair to those that wouldn't hear it otherwise or don't look at my website. But we'll continue to have these on a regular basis, yes.
Indulge me just a moment.
Sure, go for it.
And I appreciate that you do go to lots of different businesses, and I've seen what I consider, my personal opinion, to be photo ops. What I'm asking is, Sue Mark, I didn't vote for her either, but her constituent service was that she went to all groups. She didn't just go to businesses and speak to employers and employees. She actually went to groups that were not as influential in the political season. And
Well,
so
if you're
that's what
making an
I'm-
invitation, I'd love to sit down with,
Be glad to.
if we don't agree or disagree, short of going to a Democrat Party meeting, which not very welcoming for me, but absolutely, in terms of that, I have enormous respect for Sue Myrick, but Sue didn't hold regular town hall meetings. I do. I'm sorry. Thank you, Kristen. We have 86 folks here tonight, and thank you, Kristen, for letting me know that. Thank you all for coming out. And thank you. But we have 86 folks here, and just wanted to announce that for you as well. So if more folks have questions that haven't asked questions, if you'll line up, and that we'll try to do is to get through these questions so we can have time to talk afterwards. Now, in terms of going out and doing town hall meetings, I've done, I'll do 6 this year. This is my 4th town hall meeting this week. And so that's more than Sue did over, a decade. So, and that's no offense to her, she just had a different style of operating and moving about the district. And obviously, as Charlotte Mayor, we all knew her. So if she's walking down the street, people say, "Hi, Sue." The thing is, when you look like me, I kind of look like just about anyone. And so people might recognize me for somebody else, not say what they said to Sue. So, but I get your point of reaching out and talking to other people that you normally don't talk to as well. So, yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Dot Martin. I'm from Belmont. I'm an accountant, and there's a lot of subjects I could ask about, but I won't even go into that. My 2 main concerns are the weakness of our military. A lot of people are not aware how weak our military is. Without our military, we will not be free. And I saw where the Pentagon said we are the weakest that we have ever been and more vulnerable than ever. This concerns me. I want to know if this can be fixed and secure our safety. And second, I saw where a Marine in D.C. yesterday was attacked by a group of Palestinians. He was doing nothing but carrying an American flag and an Israeli flag. They were hollering, "Allah Akbar." They attacked him. How secure are we from these radical terrorists, which is what they are, in our own country? Because you see it flaring up everywhere in our country. This concerns me for our freedom, for our children, because they have no intention of us to die.
Well, national security and our safety for terrorist threats is always a high concern. And so about that individual circumstance, I don't have the details of it. But in terms of the military, our military is still strong. What we don't have is a solid plan, and we're not conveying strength. So I don't believe that we should have a presence and be everywhere around the globe. I don't think that's where the American people are right now and what we desire. But I'm trying to answer your question. So Are the men and women in our military as smart and capable as they were 5 years ago? Absolutely. Do we have good weapon systems as we did 5 years ago? Absolutely. What's going to happen over the next 10 years? It does not look good unless we have a change when it comes to defense policy. And the weapon systems, just like our computers and our smartphones and everything else, need constant updating. And that costs money. As a matter of our national security, we have to fund it. And that is a major priority. What we have currently is a president that doesn't have a solid plan for foreign policy. The Arab Spring only benefited one country, Tunisia. The rest of the Middle East is more of a mess than it was before. You have Hamas and Hezbollah. You have ISIS on the rise in Iraq. You have a mess in Afghanistan and a horrible tragedy today of what happened in Afghanistan, with the highest ranking a two-star general killed, which he's the highest ranking member of our military to be killed post 9/11. So it's a major concern. You have to have a plan now. You have to have a plan. You have to be able to convey strength. And conveying strength does not mean picking fights needlessly, but it means when you set a red line, you mean it, and you follow through on your word. And we have not been doing it. And that goes from the Secretary of State, John Kerry, to the President himself. And that is deeply problematic. And it's not one problem, it's that overall strategic problem of conveying strength and a willingness to fight when it's necessary in our nation's interest. Much less what our Secretary of State is saying about one of our truest friends and allies in the world, Israel, which makes me so infuriated. And so what we have to do for Congress is ensure that when funding comes through for Iron Dome, which we just provided more money for on Friday, and that passed through the House and the Senate, it's on the President's desk. I don't know that he signed it yet, but he should sign it, and that's what he said he was going to do. So, but we have to help and support our allies. We also have to do something different, which is we're the #1 economy in the world still, but we're paying a disproportionate share for the globe on taking action around the world. We have to ask the #3 and #4 economies, Japan and Germany, to step up and do their part. If you're sitting in Germany, Iran's nuclear program is more of a threat to you than it is to the American people. They need to step up. Same for Japan on what's happening in Southeast Asia and Asia generally. And so, you know.
The state of Indiana is doing so, but they're almost in a bully situation with the administration saying that we will cut your funding if you don't meet what we think is the standard. I appreciate your comment earlier that education should be about the community and the parents, because it is a true partnership with us as a parent and as a Board of Education in the school system. So my question goes directly to the funding. What can you do to help Gaston County, the state of North Carolina, as we look to do something different than the Common Core standard, in making sure that as the government funds public education, which they do, that they fund it without the strings and they fund it properly? Because one of the things that we just discussed as a board is the community eligibility provision, which gives 21 of our schools in Gaston County a free breakfast and lunch. Not all 100% of those 21 schools need that, but the federal funding is providing that. And to me, that federal funding can be used somewhere else in public education to help that. So as our congressman, what can you do and what can you do with your constituents to help make sure that federal funding comes to do what it's supposed to be doing, what our tax dollars are paying for it to do, but without all the strings, so that we have more local authority and more state authority?
Well, #1, I've voted to repeal Common Core. What's interesting is how many people understand what Common Core is. That's what's fascinating to me. It shows that parents do care, and communities do care, and can be trusted with the education of their children. And that might blow away some politicians, but it's reassuring to me. So that's #1. Now, we need some help in the Senate to get that passed, right? But the other thing we have to be aware of, in the U.S. Department of Labor, we have over 1,600 people employed in the U.S. Department of Labor. The average salary is twice that of a teacher in a classroom for those 1,600 people. You think you're getting any value out of that? Do we have any teachers here, by the way? 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you so much. Thank you all. So we have, I think it's better for us to get those funds away from funding people, those monies away from funding people behind a desk and send it to the classroom. And that means sending it to the state and local level because it can be better implemented at the state and local level. That's why I think block granting education funding to the state level and removing those strings. We have high standards here in North Carolina. We have a testing regime. We don't need a federal testing regime on top of that, even if it was called No Child Left Behind. And I've opposed that. And so getting those funds here is going to be the best thing we can do, and freeing up, eliminate all these strings that are attached to the funding, and let you do what is best for children in the classroom. Thank you. Thanks. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Chris Reason. I live in the suburbs of metropolitan High Shoals. I do, really. This gentleman here can attest to my list. I've scratched off Israel, I've scratched off borders, scratched off the Constitution. We haven't touched on health care. Nothing we can do about that at this point in time. I'm going to get to that in just a second. Young lady brought up the weakness of the military. We haven't touched on the VA. That's being sort of addressed. The IRS, oh my gosh. We got down to the bottom. I jotted down family values, and my wife can attest. I made the list about 10 minutes to 6 when I got here on it. So I think we've got a lot of like-minded people sitting here. I would like to ask a question of them first, and I'll ask this to you. How many voted in the last 2 or 3 primaries and or elections? Perfect. Now, you announced there's 86 folks here. It would have been really nice to have 586 folks here, wouldn't it? My problem, and I'm a lifelong politician. I started when I was a freshman in high school in 1964. Barry Goldwater was my man. Okay, so I've been involved. So my problem is not all these big things, because you've alluded to the checks and balances. I'm glad at least one politician understands the Constitution. I suspect there's a whole lot more out there that do. Okay. With that, I come to the point of understanding. A few days ago, I heard there's over 600 plus bills sitting on everybody's desk, passed by the House. And okay, the House of Representatives represent us as districts. We have 2 senators. They're supposed to represent the entire state, and as that goes. We also have federal judges, circuit judges, district judges making law, bypassing the voters who have actually voted legislation, whether it's on family value issues or whatever it might be, bypassing the voters and making law, which I guess is against the Constitution as far as I understand the Constitution myself. So to the point of every 2 years and 4 years for the presidency, the voting and our opportunity to change and what have you, both parties at this point in time, we understand what the other party is doing through all kinds of things, but to the Republican Party, and you represent as a part of that, as the Republican Party, there may be some Republican Party people here from the state or local level, the voter apathy, not in this room, because they came here for a reason on it, but the overall voter apathy, what were the percentages in the last primaries, or even in the last elections? You alluded to the problem in 2012, where we all thought we had an opportunity, and there were less people that actually went out and voted because they didn't think there was any choice. So, to your point of checks and balances and encouraging people to vote, I would like to hear more out of, and understand the law that you're bound by, but more out of your office. What can both you and the party do to encourage voting. And I just heard the other day that it's almost a foregone conclusion there's going to be a Republican candidate in 16, and I'm going, oh my God.
Who's that? I haven't heard that.
Yeah, well,
Because I don't think there's any consensus in this room or anything that I've heard.
Well,
Anyway, if you'll get to your question, we've got three more folks in line.
Yeah, I understand. What can you, as a representative of our district, a Republican, and a representative of the Republican Party, do to increase voter activity? Because all this list of things that everybody's talking about has to do with which style of government is going on.
Right.
So everybody voted here, but not everybody in the county voted.
Right. And that means constant outreach. You can't do enough in terms of talking to people and even talking to people that you may not think agree with you, but it's still worth having the conversation to understand that there are motivating principles and ideas behind the two different parties. And you have to understand those motivating principles and ideas in order to make some decisions about which direction you want to take the country. And which person or party you want to put in charge to drive us forward, to lead us forward. But if you have ideas of what I should be doing, I'm all ears and we can talk about it afterwards. But I don't think either party, well, I would say that the President's Party did a pretty darn good job of motivating their people to get out and vote, and Mitt Romney's party didn't do as good a job of getting people out to vote. So there's a lot we can learn in terms of getting folks out to the polls. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mike Thomas from Stanley. First of all, thank you for actually touching on economics, which really should make James Madison be proud, because that's one of the other jobs, actually.
He's a giant in my eyes.
Sorry?
He's a giant in my eyes.
Oh, it's actually short.
Little history joke, little history joke.
You mentioned the fair tax, or the flat tax and the fair tax, but I was wondering what revisions included in y'all's versions of the flat tax to actually help accomplish some of the issues that the fair tax actually involves, with, such as 55% of final products of goods are included or embedded costs, which hurts manufacturing, taxing goods from the producers and manufacturers, because increase foreign competition inside the United States, also makes NAFTA such a big deal. How would you help to limit those? Because it doesn't matter if you change the flat tax to 15% and then you just embed the cost again into the goods, but it doesn't help us at all, and it doesn't limit your spending. It keeps your spending, it can actually increase your spending, whereas fair tax is a neutral, revenue neutral plan. What would you do to actually take away some of those points to actually address the issue of between manufacturers, between end users, and maybe a provision actually help on a sales tax, like the fair tax, which includes on the final product, because our GDP is growing every year, why not take advantage of it?
Yeah, no, look, I mean, both ideas are better than our current tax code, for sure, right? I think you'd agree on that.
Anything closer to no IRS is better.
Right, right. And that is one of the beauties of the plan you're supporting. And so, but I think in the near term, what is most achievable is to have a fair, flatter tax. What was in the Paul Ryan House Republican budget 3 years ago was a 2-rate sales tax. So instead of having the 5 rates that we currently have, we eliminated down to 2, which is far better than our current tax code, I think, and much fairer for people. We can talk a lot more about the ins and outs of this, but how many of y'all know about the fair tax? Right, so it's not a well-known idea, and so a lot more has to be done in order to communicate the ideas, but we can talk more afterwards. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Ann Carroll. I'm from Belmont. One of the biggest things that's struggling me is that we are constantly repeating history. Even within the military,
David, if you'll hold the microphone closer.
even within the military, we're constantly repeating history. We built a multi-billion-dollar base in Iraq that a lot of people disagree. They wanted us out of Iraq. Well, I've been to 7th and 8th and 9th world countries. And sometimes a military presence and our presence is definitely needed. If you didn't watch Sunday, Nancy Pelosi and her little comment about Qatar told her that Hamas was a humanitarian group. And then when she was asked point blank if they were terrorists, that they are labeled a terrorist organization, she went, mm-hmm. So it really, I grew up in the DC area. I knew and I saw back in the early 80s, actually the reports and stuff. I mean, I grew up in a family where we dealt with Osama bin Laden in the 70s and in the 80s. And it's here. It's not going away. And this is the only time in my entire life that I am terrified. Other countries are looking a lot better to military retirees. My kids are in the military. They're being sized down. There is more hierarchy in the Air Force that are being given their pink slips. There goes all the experience. It's not technology that wins wars, it's people and ideas. We have Christians that are in Iraq that are being crucified, and we're doing nothing. We're turning loose 6 terrorists that are sitting in hotels that are better than the 7 Seasons in Qatar. And they are running Hamas, and we're paying for it. And it's coming out of our Congress. They're voting for it. I know, growing up in DC, that there is 20 to 50 lobbyists that come to visit every congressman. There's been one president in our recent history that took no paycheck. That actually did his duty, his civic duty, proudly, and in the way that our government was originally set up. Our government was originally set up so that congressmen and have more congressmen that are in it for the money, to become millionaires, and to sell us out to terrorist organizations. We didn't learn that earlier when we did it Iran-Contra, we did it Afghanistan previously. We've done it in numerous nations.
Okay, let me try to address just a bit of this. And again, I'm not leaving after this, so everyone who has additional comments or questions, I'm happy to talk to you afterwards. But the frustration you have is about how I answered the question earlier to Don, which was about conveying strength versus conveying weakness. You have to have a plan, and you have to be willing to convey your might, your military might, and your ability to carry out on your words. And this president hasn't done.
We have a plan, though. We've always had a plan. I mean, Major General Green, he died today. So did a German general.
Okay. So why don't we talk afterwards? How's
Okay.
that? Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Congressman, it's under 45 seconds.
And you're the last one up.
I lived in Charlotte, I lived in North Carolina 32 years, and I knew Mr. Kimbrell. I think he paid for this beautiful room. So tell me some slack. Melissa, I just want to thank you for doing this. It's really awesome.
Thanks.
Many of your peers won't do it, but it's really kind of neat that you came out. I didn't even know he had an opponent, so I think it'd be great. And you're going to win. Everybody knows that. They're in your districts. Why don't you debate the guy? Whatever. But more important, you spent a lot of your time in D.C. working on financial services stuff, so I thought it'd be interesting to tell folks, the power of the big banks, 5, 7 big banks, is just astounding. And you take a lot of money from them, Obama takes a lot of money from them. Nobody seems to really be worried about what's going on. And could you talk about that, if that's an issue that you're concerned about?
Sure. Well, you live in Charlotte. I don't represent Charlotte, but I represent. This is as close as I get to Charlotte. But since you asked,
you're on the financial services.
I understand you're from Charlotte, so I'm just saying. Number one, if you look at the big banks, their number one issue of the last generation was the bailout. I voted against the bailout. Plain, clear, simple. I believe that Dodd-Frank is the Obamacare of financial regulation. It has raised costs and limited options for consumers, for my constituents. I don't think that's the right approach. And if you look at the statistics, 76% of Americans received free checking up to 3 years ago. And this last year, only 38% received free checking. That's a consequence of regulation. So I think the approach is very wrong. They put together new institutions, the Federal Stability Oversight Council, the CFPB, which is supposed to be about consumer protection. And these agencies are highly dysfunctional and not meeting the demands that Dodd-Frank said they were supposed to meet. And so, 4 years after Dodd-Frank was passed, 5 years after the crisis, we're no better off than we were then in terms of making sure the regulations are clear for big institutions and small. And in fact, what Dodd-Frank did was punish small institutions, and so you're seeing the merger of community banks into larger institutions, which limits choice. Again, I think it's a very flawed approach, and so I've tried to work through this to give regulatory relief to small institutions, whether it's credit unions or banks, so that they can actually compete, and so my constituents have options. When it comes to mortgages, they've made getting a mortgage tougher, not easier. And when we have the government controlling over 90% of the mortgage marketplace, that doesn't give us more options and more choice, it gives us less. And in fact, as taxpayers, it's even riskier now because we have a huge loan portfolio owned by Fannie and Freddie that are federally, they're basically wards of the federal government. That is problematic. We have to address that. And in fact, we have to end too big to fail. Right? The idea that large, complex financial institutions can go broke and fail and file for bankruptcy should be a part of our laws, should be a part of our regulations, and it should be assumed that an institution, large or small, should have the freedom to fail. And we as taxpayers shouldn't have to bail them out. Thank you. Thanks for asking the question. Yes, sir. You're the last question.
Good. A quick one. Patrick Dan Nation from Gastonia. Also a part of the middle, also Mr. Kimball. I think it's important that a lot of people in here understand one of the things you're leading the charge on in Washington is very important to the local economy and the national economy as well. The current administration is pushing a free trade agreement called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And one of the things the Trans-Pacific Partnership does is negotiate a free trade agreement with Vietnam. Vietnam is a communist country, is a non-market economy with state-controlled businesses and controlled currencies. Patrick is leading the charge in Washington to be sure that if this thing passes, which unfortunately I think it probably will, that the textile industry in general and our industry in his district specifically is treated fairly. And I want to thank you for that because in your party that's not always the most sexy thing to do. So thanks a lot for understanding the importance of the job and that manufacturing drives is a fuel that drives our economy.
Well, thank you, Dan. I certainly appreciate it. And about trade, we've talked about this, and I appreciate you bringing this up. But we have trade agreements, and look, people say, well, it's a free trade agreement, you should be for it. Well, free trade is not always fair. It's not always fair. If you want to abide by our rules and regulations, we'll compete with any country around the world, and we will eat their lunch. I believe that American workers can do that. I believe we have the capacity to compete. But we shouldn't have these manipulated agreements that are called free when they're really just manipulations of different quotas and taxation on different types of products coming into our country. So we give them unfettered access to our large market, the largest market in the world, and they give us very restricted access to their market in their country that's very small. It's not a fair and balanced agreement. And so I'm trying to work through these issues to make sure that manufacturing, and specifically textiles, are regarded as important by our national government and the folks negotiating this agreement. We can't lose more jobs from textiles or manufacturing, and we can't give away this slight, small economic recovery we have in the name of some trade agreement. And so trying to work through that has been very difficult, but I'm trying to make sure that we have a voice there and trying to be your voice so that we do that. Thank you for bringing it up, sir. Thank you. And thanks.
Lobbyists in Washington.
Sure. And I'm your lobbyist in Washington. I work for you. Sure. Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we talk about that after? I was going to close on that, but happy to talk to you
You're
after.
familiar with this lady, it's in the book.
Okay.
You don't get very good press out of here, but,
I don't know what the book is, sir. We can talk afterwards. And so, but I do want to close tonight. Y'all have been very patient, very kind to wait this long to sit through this. And it said that the mind can't absorb what the seat can't bear. And I think we're about that time to wrap up. But I want to say thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to represent you and to try to be your voice in Washington, not Washington's voice to hear, to actually carry our voice, our values, and our ideas to Washington and try to better our system and better our country. There's a lot of doom and gloom right now. But I'm more optimistic about what our country can return to. Those basic values and principles that make us strong and great. We do need to make some changes. And my motivation is to wake up every day to ensure that my daughter, who's not yet born, and my wife's due in 2 weeks, so I'm concerned and want to make sure that she inherits a country better than I inherited. That's been all of our motivating principles, hasn't it? As a country, to make sure we leave it better than we inherited it. And right now, there's a lot of concern that we can't do that. We can. And I'm optimistic. And I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to try to put that optimism into policy, even if it's a challenge every day to get things done up there. But thank you so much for your attention. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. And thank you for your questions. God bless.